The exhilarating Dominion had conquered hundreds of worlds. Their warships, massive and unstoppable, moved through space like gods of destruction. No species had ever stood against them. No civilization had ever survived their wrath. Now they had set their sights on a new target, Earth's distant colony, Avalon 7. Admiral Chorus stood on the bridge of the Exhilarating flagship, Doombringer. He gazed at the holographic display of Avalon 7, a green and blue planet floating in space like a child's toy. Next to it, a tiny human fleet stood in formation. There were only a handful of ships. Outdated, weak, laughable. A auxiliary officer smirked. Is this really their defense? Pathetic. The bridge filled with laughter. The auxiliary were warriors, their empire built on conquest. They had crushed species far stronger than humanity. To them, humans were nothing more than insects waiting to be stepped on. Admiral Chorus turned to his second-in-command, Commander Vexus. "Open a channel," he said. "Let's hear what these creatures have to say before we burn their world." A moment later, the holographic display flickered. A human face appeared. It was an older man, battle-worn but calm. His uniform was simple, nothing like the ornate armor of the auxiliary. Yet his eyes held something unsettling. "This is Captain Reynolds of the United Earth Fleet," the man said. His voice was steady, unshaken. "You are entering human territory. Leave now or face the consequences." The bridge erupted in laughter again. Commander Vexus wiped a tear from his eye. Did he just threaten us? Admiral Chorus chuckled. Humans do have a sense of humor. He leaned forward, his sharp teeth glinting under the dim lights. "Tell me, Captain, what consequences could you possibly offer?" Reynolds didn't blink. "We don't want war. But if you attack, you will regret it." The laughter died down slightly. There was something wrong. Humans were weak. They should be begging for mercy. But this man wasn't afraid. "Why?" Chorus scoffed. "Enough games." He waved a hand. "Cut the channel. Begin the bombardment." The human's face disappeared. The auxiliary officers grinned, eager for destruction. Outside, the auxiliary fleet moved into attack formation. Gigantic cannons powered up, glowing with deadly energy. On the planet below, millions of human civilians watched the sky, waiting for the end. And then, something changed. A sudden alarm blared across the Doombringer. The auxiliary crew snapped to attention. "Admiral," a technician shouted. "Something is happening. Our systems are being hacked." Chorus frowned. "Impossible." But the lights flickered. The ship trembled. Then, one by one, the warships in the auxiliary fleet began shutting down. Engines died. Weapons powered off. Shields collapsed. Panic filled the bridge. "What is this?" Vexus yelled. "Who is doing this?" The answer came too late. A single human ship, smaller than the rest, emerged from the shadows of Avalon 7's moon. It was sleek, dark, almost invisible against the blackness of space. Then, with a single pulse, it fired. And the nightmare began. Panic spread across the Doombringer's bridge like wildfire. The alarms screamed, red warning lights flashing across every console. The auxiliary crew, once confident and laughing, now scrambled to make sense of the impossible. "Status report." Admiral Chorus barked, his voice sharp. A technician's claws flew over the control panel. "Sir, our main systems are shutting down. Weapons, shields, engines, everything is failing." Chorus clenched his jaw. This had to be some kind of malfunction. The auxiliary Dominion had never faced an enemy capable of disrupting their technology. Not once. "Restore power. Override the system," he commanded. "We're trying, Admiral, but something is blocking us." Commander Vexus slammed his fist against the console. "This has to be a trick. The humans don't have this kind of technology." And yet, the impossible was happening before their eyes. Outside the massive flagship, the rest of the auxiliary fleet was in chaos. Warships drifted helplessly, their glowing energy cores flickering like dying stars. Smaller fighter crafts spiraled out of control, their pilots screaming for help over the comms. And then, the human ship moved. It was small compared to the monstrous Exhilarating vessels, sleek and dark, like a predator lurking in the void. Unlike the Exhilarating fleet, it showed no signs of power failure. Instead, it approached with deadly precision. On the bridge of the Doombringer, the crew watched in stunned silence as the unknown ship came closer. Then the holographic display flickered to life. Captain Reynolds appeared once again, his expression calm. "This is your last warning, Admiral Chorus. Leave now or suffer the consequences." Chorus bared his sharp teeth in frustration. "What have you done to our ships?" Reynolds tilted his head slightly. "Humanity learned long ago that brute strength isn't enough to win a war. So we adapted, we evolved, and we created something special." Chorus snarled. "You expect me to believe a single human ship crippled my entire fleet?" Reynolds didn't answer immediately. He simply said, "Fire." The human ship obeyed. A single pulse of energy erupted from its hull, invisible to the naked eye, but devastating in its effect. The Doombringer shuddered violently. Sparks exploded from control panels. Screens turned to static. The once mighty warship groaned as if it were alive and in pain. "Admiral," a technician screamed, "we're losing control." And then, in an instant, the Doombringer's weapons turned inward. The ship's own cannons powered up, their targeting systems hijacked. Warning sirens blared as the ship's main guns locked onto the Exhilarating fleet. "No, no," Chorus roared. But it was too late. The flagship, once the symbol of Exhilarating dominance, fired upon its own kind. The energy blasts tore through the helpless warships, ripping them apart in an explosion of fire and debris. The Exhilarating fleet was no longer attacking Avalon 7. It was destroying itself. On the bridge of the Doombringer, Chorus could do nothing but watch in horror. The humans had done the impossible. They had turned the Exhilarating's own strength against them. And worst of all, they had barely even started. The bridge of the Doombringer was in chaos. Warning sirens howled, red emergency lights flashed, and the acrid scent of burning circuits filled the air. Admiral Chorus gripped the edge of his command console, his claws digging into the metal. This wasn't just an attack. This was humiliation. "Status," he roared over the noise. A trembling technician struggled to respond. "Sir, our weapons are still locked on friendly ships. We can't override the system. It's controlling us." Chorus turned to Commander Vexus, fury in his eyes. "How is this possible? How did the humans?" Then, another explosion rocked the ship. The Doombringer trembled violently as a nearby Exhilarating warship erupted into flames, its shattered remains drifting into the void. The fleet was being torn apart, and the humans had only fired once. Chorus gritted his teeth. Enough of this. He slammed a fist onto the control panel. "Switch to manual control. Prepare for a full assault." But the moment the words left his mouth, the lights flickered. And then, for a brief moment, everything stopped. The alarms, the flashing lights, even the ship's vibrations. Then a voice echoed through the bridge. Cold, calm, human. "Admiral Chorus," said Captain Reynolds, his voice coming from every speaker on the ship. "I warned you." Chorus stiffened. Reynolds was in their comms system. He wasn't just disabling their ships, he was inside them. Chorus snarled. "You think this changes anything, human? You might have disrupted us, but we still have numbers. We are the Exhilarating Dominion. We will crush you." Reynolds' voice remained steady. "Your numbers mean nothing if your fleet is useless." Suddenly, the main display screen flickered to life, revealing a live feed of the battlefield. Chorus watched in horror. The Exhilarating fleet was no longer an attacking force. It was a graveyard. Dead warships drifted, their hulking forms dark and silent. Others burned, explosions tearing through their once indestructible hulls. And the worst part, the humans had barely fired a shot. The Doombringer groaned again as more systems shut down. Chorus felt the weight of reality crashing onto him. They had walked into a trap. A perfect, silent, merciless trap. And the humans had been waiting for this moment. "Admiral," Reynolds' voice cut through the silence. "This is your last chance. Surrender your fleet. Leave Avalon 7, or be destroyed." Chorus' claws curled into a fist. He was Xilari. He was a warrior. The Dominion never surrendered. His eyes darted across the bridge, searching for any remaining options. Then he saw it. A single emergency override switch. A desperate plan formed in his mind. He had one chance. He reached for the switch. But before his claws could touch it, the ship shook violently. The main display flickered. And then, for the first time in his life, Admiral Chorus felt something he had never known before. Terror. Because outside, in the darkness of space, more human ships were emerging from the shadows. And they were not here to negotiate. Admiral Chorus had never known fear. Until now. On the Doombringer's bridge, the Xilari officers stood frozen, their eyes locked onto the display screen. More human ships had appeared, dozens of them, emerging from the shadows like predators circling wounded prey. These were not the outdated human warships the Xilari had expected. These were something else. Sleek, silent, dangerous. Where did they come from? Commander Vexus whispered, his voice barely audible. The answer was terrifyingly simple. They had been waiting. Chorus' claws trembled as he reached for the emergency override switch. If he could just reset the ship's core systems. A cold click stopped him. He looked down. His hand was frozen in place, inches from the switch. A small metallic device had latched onto his armor, locking his movements. Then his entire arm went numb. Chorus gasped, looking around wildly. The same thing was happening to the rest of his crew. Small, precise pulses of energy were striking them, paralyzing their limbs without killing them. Neural disruptors. Reynolds' voice echoed through the bridge. Non-lethal. Effective. We could have killed you by now, but we're giving you a choice. Chorus gritted his teeth. He could barely move. His mighty warship was disabled. His fleet was in ruins. And the humans, they were toying with him. The rage inside him burned like a dying star. "You think you've won," he growled. "The Xilari Dominion will never surrender." Reynolds sighed. "You still don't understand, do you?" The display screen changed. A new image appeared, one that made Chorus' blood run cold. It was the Xilari homeworld, and it was surrounded by human ships. Chorus' breath caught in his throat. "No, that's impossible." Reynolds' voice was calm, almost sympathetic. "While you were busy invading Avalon 7, we were already at your doorstep. You never had a chance." Silence fell over the bridge. Even the most battle-hardened Xilari officers looked shaken. They weren't the hunters anymore. They were the hunted. Chorus clenched his jaw. He had spent his entire life conquering weaker species. Now, for the first time, he was the one outmatched. Reynolds' voice came one last time, firm and final. "This is over, Admiral. Leave now, or be erased from history." Chorus closed his eyes. His pride screamed at him to fight. But the truth was undeniable. The Xilari Dominion had lost. Slowly, painfully, he forced the words from his mouth. "Stand down." A message was sent. The remaining Xilari ships, what little was left of them, powered down their weapons. The battle was over before it had ever truly begun, and humanity had won. Admiral Chorus stared at the screen in disbelief. His mighty fleet, the pride of the Xilari Dominion, was in ruins. His warships, once symbols of fear and power, now drifted lifelessly through space. And worst of all, humanity had already reached his homeworld. It wasn't just a defeat, it was an execution. The bridge of the Doombringer was silent. Every Xilari officer stood frozen, their bodies tense, their eyes locked on their leader. They were waiting for Chorus to order one final desperate attack. But there was no attack left to give. "Admiral," Commander Vexus spoke, his voice low. "What do we do?" Chorus' claws dug into his armrests. His pride told him to fight. His instincts told him to resist. The exhilarating never surrendered. But what good was pride against an enemy who had already won? The display screen flickered again, showing Captain Reynolds aboard his command ship. His expression remained calm, but there was something in his eyes, something Chorus recognized. Pity. That stung worse than defeat. "You made the right choice, Admiral," Reynolds said. "But this isn't just about Avalon 7. This is about the entire Dominion." Chorus narrowed his eyes. "What do you mean?" Reynolds took a slow breath. "Look at your homeworld." The screen shifted back to the exhilarating capital planet, and for the first time, Chorus noticed something strange. The human fleet wasn't firing. They weren't bombing cities. They weren't destroying infrastructure. They were waiting. And then Chorus understood. Terror crept into his mind, not because of the destruction humanity could bring, but because of what they had already done. The Xilari were a race of conquerors. Their empire thrived on fear. Their power came from their reputation. Unstoppable, merciless, absolute. But now, across the galaxy, thousands of species were watching this moment, watching the mighty Xilari Dominion fall without a fight, watching them surrender to the very race they once mocked. This wasn't just a military defeat. This was the collapse of their entire empire. Reynolds' voice cut through the silence. "We could wipe you out right now. Erase your entire species from existence." He leaned forward, his eyes cold. "But we're giving you a choice." Chorus swallowed hard. What choice? The human captain's expression hardened. "The Xilari Dominion ends today. No more conquests. No more invasions. From this moment on, your empire ceases to exist." Chorus felt his chest tighten. "You're asking us to abandon everything we are." "No," Reynolds said simply. "We're asking you to evolve." Chorus' claws curled into fists. This was worse than death, worse than destruction. But he knew the truth. They had no other option. With a heavy breath, he spoke the words he never thought he'd say. "The Dominion is over." A silence fell over the bridge. The Xilari officers stood still, their faces hollow, their world shattered. The empire that had lasted for centuries had ended in a single battle, and humanity had won. Admiral Chorus sat in silence, his mind heavy with the weight of defeat. The bridge of the Doombringer, once filled with pride and arrogance, now felt hollow. Every Xilari officer stood motionless, their gazes fixed on the main screen where humanity's fleet loomed over their homeworld. The Xilari Dominion, the greatest empire in the galaxy, was gone. Chorus had never imagined such an end. He had believed, with every fiber of his being, that his people were invincible, that they were destined to rule. But now, reality had crushed that illusion. And the worst part, humanity hadn't even needed to fire a single shot at their capital. They had broken the Dominion with strategy, intelligence, and patience. The silence was shattered by Captain Reynolds' voice. "Your people will survive, Admiral, but not as conquerors." Chorus gritted his teeth. "You expect us to bow to you, to become your subjects." Reynolds shook his head. "No, we don't want to rule you. We don't want to control you. We want you to change." Chorus clenched his fists. Change. It was such a simple word, yet it carried the weight of an entire civilization. The Xilari had always believed in power through domination. Without it, what were they? He looked around the bridge. His officers, warriors who had served him for years, were lost, their identities crumbling before his eyes. Commander Vexus finally spoke, his voice barely a whisper. "If we are no longer conquerors, what are we?" Chorus had no answer. But Reynolds did. "You have a choice," the human captain said. Rebuild, trade, grow, become something greater than warlords. He paused, then added, or refused to change, and fade into history as a dead empire. Chorus wanted to argue, to fight. But deep down, he knew Reynolds was right. If the Exhilarating tried to rebuild their empire through conquest, humanity would end them. And now, the rest of the galaxy had seen their weakness. They would never be feared again. Chorus took a deep, shaky breath. He had spent his life fighting. Now he had to do the hardest thing of all. He had to let go. After a long silence, he nodded. We will adapt. The words felt foreign in his mouth, but they were the only path left. Reynolds studied him for a moment, then gave a slight nod. Then humanity has no quarrel with you. With that, the communication link cut off. The human fleet remained in position, watching, waiting. Chorus turned to his officers. Send the message. The war is over. The Dominion is no more. No one moved at first. Then, one by one, they obeyed. Messages were sent to every remaining auxiliary warship. Across the galaxy, fleets powered down. Battles stopped. Soldiers laid down their weapons. It was over. Chorus stared at the screen one last time. The mighty auxiliary Dominion had fallen. And now, they had to decide what came next. For the first time in his life, Admiral Chorus felt small. The mighty auxiliary Dominion, which had ruled the stars for centuries, had fallen. Not in a glorious final battle, but in silence. Defeated not by brute force, but by something far more devastating: strategy, patience, and intelligence. Humanity had proven something terrifying. They didn't need to conquer. They could outthink any empire that tried to challenge them. The bridge of the Doombringer remained eerily quiet. Officers who had once commanded fleets now stood in stunned silence, their purpose shattered. The war was over. Their identity as conquerors was gone. Chorus turned his gaze to the main screen. The human fleet still hovered near the auxiliary homeworld, watching. They weren't celebrating. They weren't demanding tribute. They were simply waiting. Captain Reynolds' voice came through one last time. It's time for you to decide, Admiral. What will the auxiliary become? Chorus didn't answer immediately. He looked around at his officers, at the warriors who had followed him without question. The fear in their eyes told him the truth. They had no idea how to exist without war. For centuries, the Dominion had crushed weaker civilizations, stealing resources, demanding obedience. They had never built alliances, never sought peace. But now that they had no other choice, Chorus took a deep breath and stepped forward. We will rebuild, he said, his voice steady but uncertain. Not as conquerors, not as rulers, but as something else. Commander Vexus turned to him, disbelief in his eyes. Admiral, what if we fail? Chorus met his gaze. Then we adapt. Vexus hesitated, then nodded. Slowly, the other officers followed. One by one, the auxiliary accepted their new reality. Reynolds' voice came through the comms again. Then our work here is done. The human fleet began to move, their warships breaking formation. One by one, they disappeared into the void, leaving the auxiliary homeworld untouched. They had never come to destroy. They had come to change history. Chorus watched the last human ship vanish into the blackness of space. The weight of what had just happened settled fully onto his shoulders. The Dominion was no more. But maybe, just maybe, the auxiliary had been given something greater than conquest. A chance to truly live. As he stared out into the vast unknown, Chorus whispered a single phrase to himself, one that no auxiliary had ever spoken before. A new beginning.